Hello, good morning. This morning, we'd like to discuss about the CFM56, the turbofan engine. The CFM56 is manufactured by the CFM International, which is a joint venture between American company, GE Aviation, and a French company called Safran Aircraft Engines. The CFM56 is a high bypass turbofan engine with several variations. The bypass ranges from 5 to 1 to 6 to 1, and it can generate from 18,500 to 34,000 pound forces of thrust. It is a two-shaft or two-spool engine. Each shaft is powered by its own turbine section. Oops, wait. That was too fast even for a jet engine, right? So let's break it down in smaller pieces. As I mentioned, the CFM56 is a turbofan engine. Let's take a look at the diagram of a turbofan. The diagram of a turbofan shows that the airflow is divided into two airflows. The first airflow, or the primary airflow, goes inside the engine core and passes through the compressor, combustion, and turbines, and then exhaust. And the secondary airflow just bypasses the engine core. I also mentioned that the CFM56 is a high bypass turbofan, and the bypass ratio ranges from 5 to 1 to 6 to 1. What do I mean by that? What is the bypass ratio? Well, the bypass ratio of a turbofan engine is the ratio between the mass flow rate of the bypass stream to the mass flow rate entering the core, which means the air that bypasses the core divided by the air that goes into the core. And we also mentioned that the CFM56 is a two-shaft or two-spool engine. Each shaft is powered by its own turbine section, which means that we have two independent but concentric shafts that attach high pressure turbine to the high pressure compressor and low pressure turbine to the low pressure compressor or the fan and booster. Let's take a look at the diagram so we can explain a little better. Uh, let's take a look at the blue box where we have the fan or the low pressure compressor. The blue box. The first stage is the fan blades. The fan blades are attached to the fan disc, and they are responsible for 80% of the thrust of CFM56 thrust. And so that's the reason it must be well cleaned and lubricated. Behind the first stage blades or the fan blades, we do have the booster. The booster is three-stage rotating blades and also stators. And behind it, if you take a look at the green box, is the high pressure compressor. The high pressure compressor is uh, nine discs, nine stages, sorry, uh, and behind the high pressure compressor in the red box, we have the combustion area. The combustion area has the combustion chamber and the fuel nozzles. Behind the combustion chamber or combustion area, we do have the high pressure turbine. The high pressure turbine in the yellow box is a single stage, and this single stage drives the high pressure compressor through or connected by the shaft, the outer shaft, shorter outer shaft. Behind the high pressure turbine, we do have the low pressure turbine. The low pressure turbine is 4 stages, and the low pressure turbine drives the fan and booster, or the low pressure compressor. So the low pressure turbine drives the low pressure compressor, or also called fan plus booster. The low pressure turbine is 4 stages. Yes, 4 stage blades. You may ask, how do we start this engine? Let's take a look at the diagram. Remember that we have the combustion section. The combustion section, we do have the combustion chamber, the nozzles, and also the spark plugs. We also have a gearbox. This green enlarged area or box is the gearbox. The gearbox in the CFM56 has is divided into 2 parts: the transfer gearbox and the accessory gearbox. Depending on the variation of the engine, the dash of the engine, this gearbox is either at 6 o'clock or at 4 o'clock position. Attached to the accessory gearbox, we have generator, we have fuel pump, we have fuel control, we have tachometers, we have also the starter. So the starter for the CFM56 and most jets turbofans, it's an air starter, and the air starter is working through the air, of course, air pressure. So in order to activate the starter, we have the APU. The APU sends the air pressure required to turn the engine. Remember, the gearbox, the accessory gearbox is connected to the transfer gearbox that is connected to the outer shaft, or the short shaft, or the shaft that connects the high pressure compressor to the low pressure turbine, to the high pressure turbine, sorry. High pressure compressor to the high pressure turbine. So when they start, begins to rotate the gearbox, the transfer gearbox, and the high pressure compressor and turbine. We also have the fuel control, and the fuel control is start to feeding fuel through the fuel nozzles. We also have the sparking plugs actuated, and then we can start the engine. And that's how we start the engine. So let's review what we learned today. The CFM56 is a turbofan engine. A turbofan engine has 2 airflows: the primary airflow and the secondary airflow. The primary airflow goes inside the engine core, through the compressors, through the combustion chambers, through the turbines and exhaust. This is the primary flow. The secondary flow bypasses the core, go outside the core. CFM56, the fan itself, the fan blades, it's responsible for almost 80% of the engine thrust. It's very important to keep the blades clean and lubricated. We also learned that CFM56 has 2 gearboxes: the transfer gearbox and the accessory gearbox. Transfer gearbox connects to the high pressure compressor, high pressure turbine shaft, the shorter shaft or the outer shaft. The gearbox, the transfer gearbox, is connected to the accessory gearbox. The accessory gearbox holds the starter, the generators, the tachometers, the fuel pump, fuel metering, fuel control unit. In order to start the engine, we do need an air supply to turn the starter, because the starter is an air starter engine. In order to do that, we have the APU, or we have an external power. And that's how we start the engine. And that is what we learned today. So I hope you all have a great day, a blessed day, and we talk later. Thank you very much.